Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. Just a quick note before we dive in. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not to serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are my own and those of my guest, and they don't necessarily represent those of any organizations that I'm affiliated with. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com. Now, let's get started. Welcome back to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. Today's episode is so important, and I have a terrific guest to just in a relatable way describe both why things are important in terms of estate planning and getting your financial affairs and your stuff in order, as well as suggestions to make the impossible feel possible. Rachel Donnelly is the author of a new book called Late to Your Own Funeral. She is the founder and CEO of Afterlight, and her mission is simple: to help the living deal with the dying. She created Afterlight to help clients navigate the administrative maze of estate settlement and legacy planning after experiencing the overwhelming process herself, serving as executor for both her mother's and uncle's estates while working full-time and raising 2 kids. Rachel is a graduate of Agnes Scott College. She lives in Decatur with her husband and 2 kids. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Melissa, for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation today.
Well, I think it's an important one. And just to kind of emphasize and highlight that, we're talking to mainly women, although we have a few loyal male listeners, and we welcome you too.
Welcome.
And yes, we're so glad all of you are here. But one of our past podcast guests, a rock star estate planner, Jenny Roselli, posted yesterday on Twitter that most people who don't have estate plans are women. Yeah. And the number one reason cited is they just don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about more than just your legal documents today.
Right.
But I would love to just hear how Afterlight was born and how, you came to be so passionate about a topic that a lot of people like to avoid. So tell me, what started you on this path and to, really being a helper in this important space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. I love speaking about this. I love being able to give people a little bit more knowledge around this. I think knowledge is power. And so having a couple of tools in your toolbox around this is really key. And, I feel like my life has been leading up to this career. And unfortunately, I took some lemons that I was given in my life and have turning it into my mission to help others. Unfortunately, I experienced some loss young when I was young that just led to this. My dad got sick when I was 13 and he died when I was 16. And so I watched my mom be a youngish widow. He was 48 when he died, and navigate. He was a physician. And so she was selling his medical practice, right? And figuring out like what to do with his car and all of his, stuff. And I watched my mom struggle with those sort of logistics of not only losing, of course, her husband, but then now raising 3 kids on her own and then settling her husband's affairs. And I saw her struggle with that, of course. And so I was sort of introduced to sort of the business aspects of death and dying. Unfortunately, at a young age, fast forward, and I was married and had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, I had just started a brand new job where I had no time off in the first 90 days. Unfortunately, my mom got sick, went through major surgery, and died within 60 days of that new job I had just started. She was taking care of her brother, who was in latter stages of Parkinson's disease. And so when she died, I became his caregiver and his financial power of attorney and his healthcare proxy. And So now I was settling my parents' estate. I was now taking care of an aging loved one, and then now a caregiver. Like I said,
Mm.
for my kids and this aging loved one, all while trying to work, build a career, and maybe have a few moments to myself, which seemed, impossible. And I noticed, like I said, that there was a gap in the market in terms of logistical and practical support for those going through this process, settling a loved one's affairs, dealing with their own life and what comes with that. So Afterlight was born from that, to really be skilled project managers, and sort of quarterbacks for executors and those navigating these unavoidable logistics. So I created my business and have not looked back, and now help clients not only navigate the non-legal aspects of estate administration, but also helping people to get organized ahead of time. Now seeing the same blind spots that people miss in their estate planning and organization.
Oh, it's so true. There's so much that goes into it. And really, you're describing it's not just past the point of death, it's also when you may not be able to take care of your own affairs.
Yeah.
And I love the work that you do, because a project manager is exactly what you need. It's not just like you set aside an hour or two once a week and get things done, because there are so many roadblocks,
Yeah.
both physical and
Yeah.
emotional landmines all along the way. And, oftentimes the people that are dealing with this have other things going on with their lives
Right.
and are just in a moment in time where everything is, as difficult as it can be because of personal loss
Right.
as
And,
well.
and you're doing a lot of these tasks, whether you're going through the estate planning or organization process or you're settling affairs, need to be done during normal business hours, right? Monday
Mhm.
through Friday, when you
Banker's
may be
hours, like, it's even
banker's
less.
hours.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
And maybe in person in some
yes,
cases. Oh,
exactly. So, having a skilled project manager like us to not only help sort of triage, streamline, prioritize, and make sense of that process, but to help them get the work done really adds ease at a time that
mhm.
is full of anguish.
Yeah, and so many of our listeners find themselves in, just they wake up in a moment where that sandwich generation, um, adulting is just all of a sudden it's here, there, and everywhere. And so you can't predict that, but it is certainly helpful to be prepared. Um, and when you think about your book, then who's your audience? Is it the kids
Yeah.
of these potential
I mean,
family members,
I
or
say I say this is for everybody, but of course my book is, it's not going to land with everybody, but I really wrote this book from a perspective of my experience as a member of the sandwich generation, right? So it's speaking to, millennials, Gen Xers, right? And really sort of demystifying the process of getting your affairs in order.
Mhm.
Um and so it's definitely gives you actionable steps that you can take individually to get organized, the checklist of the documents, the things that you need to do, but also helps you to think through how can I have these conversations with those around me.
Mhm.
So it's really, like I said, boiling it down into understandable, uh, more easy to understand terms for the sandwich generation and maybe their parents, but it's for anybody, I think, 18 or older with a pulse who owns or owes.
Well, I'll just talk out of class a little bit. And I'm a financial planner for my mom. I manage her money. She's very transparent. For my dad, he's remarried, and it's a blended family situation. And I know I asked him several times over the years, hey, I don't need to know everything, but you guys have taken care of like your legal documents, right? Oh, yeah, 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 I think so. And I'm like, well, that's not a very specific answer. And then I asked my sibling, and she was like, no, I think they've got it under control. Well, lo and behold, that is not the case. We fortunately, while in good health, they made some refreshes and updates. But you could assume like, hey, and I hear this all the time from clients about their kids too, adult kids, oh, they've got it under control. But going through the steps necessary to organize stuff or your
Yeah.
legal affairs is not the most touchy-feely subject. It
Nope.
is not something people like to think about their either infirmity, mortality,
No.
disability. And it's very easy to put off, like, hey, we're going to move. We'll wait till we're in that state. Or, there's two people involved in decision making and one's not ready. So what are some of your icebreakers to kind of get past that? I hope something's going on into, I know that there's a game plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always say that a great way to to slide into this conversation is also for you to go through the estate planning process yourself, right? And
Amen.
if you're
Yes.
going through this and then you're saying, hey, I've just got my will or trust, guardian's name for my kids, right? Like my financial power of attorney, I've organized all this. I feel so much better. How does that, in sharing that with them, sharing that journey, right? That can help spark a great conversation. You could also read my book and take one of the countless flaming dumpster fires that people have left behind and use that as a conversation topic to be like, I just read this story about X, Y, and Z that happened. And it made me think about what could happen if that happened to our family, right? And I
Mm,
want to make sure that you're taken care of, that you've got your affairs in order, that I would be able to advocate on your behalf, that I would be able to pay your bills. I'd be able to speak to your doctors, talk about your medication. So coming to it from a place of concern of, hey, I want us to be a team on this can be a great entree into the conversation.
I love that. Do you want to give us a flaming dumpster fire that could be fodder for the conversation?
I mean, just the number of sandwich generation, kids that come to me, or they're adults, but adult children who are coming to me. And, I had a client whose father died unexpectedly of a heart attack, right? And he was an attorney himself and didn't have a will.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know any of his bills, any of his assets. She didn't know any of his debts that he owed. He had a mortgage, right, that wasn't being paid. So in between the time that she was petitioning to become the administrator of his estate, right, like all his mortgage wasn't being paid. That she was getting, calls from all sorts of people asking her to pay bills, right? She had to pay money out of her pocket to pay for his funeral, to hire an attorney, all of those sorts of
You have to
things.
go to court at that point. Like
Yes,
everything's locked up too. So you
everything's
can't just
locked
be like,
down.
send me a check.
Exactly. So, and she was heartbroken, of course, by the sudden death of her father, and it was just so hard for her. And so we helped her sort of figure out all of this, help talk to the mortgage company. What could she make a couple of payments, right, to get up to speed so they wouldn't start or continue with foreclosure procedures or proceedings. So, and then creating a spreadsheet of his assets and his debts to get really organized.
And then what you need to do for every single one of those individual accounts. It's
Correct.
like a
Yes,
huge process for each one, right?
exactly. It is. And each process has its own red tape and,
Mm-hmm.
and bureaucracy. So going through each one of those and say, okay, tackle this one now. These will be in phase 2. These will be in phase 3. So helping them to really say, okay, these are the boulders right now that we need to tackle down to the pebbles.
I love that. Start with the big rocks and
Yeah,
then fill in with the little stuff. Triage is everything when it
it
comes
really is.
to,
Yeah.
kind of the urgency of either caring for someone who can't take care of themselves or their
Yeah.
affairs, as well as dealing with an estate.
Yeah. 100%.
Oh, that's so much. I'm just thinking too about another kind of landmine. Sometimes people draft a will, but that almost ensures that they'll be arriving in court if there's not associated either beneficiary designations or drafting of a trust, because wills get handled via probate. And so
Yes.
sometimes they've done elaborate trust, um, created a trust within a will.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. I have a personal feeling, not as an attorney, but as someone who's experienced what it takes to get through the administration. I just do not prefer the will to be kind of springing into the trust in the future because there are so many post death
Yeah.
time and money required to get to the other side that
Yes.
it does cost more to set up that trust in the beginning, but then
Oh,
you
but you're
have
gonna
something
save
that's
money.
durable.
If it's done right, it is gonna save money, time, effort, anguish, but only if done right. I've had many clients whose parents passed away and they came to me and said, "Oh, well, they had a trust." So, of course, I never make the decision because I'm not an attorney whether probate is made or not. But,
Absolutely.
they'll come to me and say, "Well, they had a trust, so everything's gonna flow in it," and then come to find out nothing, no assets were titled to the trust.
Never funded, so it
Never
doesn't.
funded, yes. So, and I'm like, oh gracious, that's just so disappointing. It's
Yeah.
so unfortunate. Because it could make this a very seamless process, if possible. But it's like those itty bitty details that people get the trust done, they get the documents created, and then they don't do the back work, the administrative bureaucracy of making sure that it's really buttoned up and funded.
And I just recommend that this happens way before any signs of decline happen
100%. Yeah.
because you never know when that's going to happen.
Yep.
There's no do-over to be like, we didn't get around to it, but we'd like to do it now if you have
Yes.
somebody who has incapacity and or I guess I should say limited do-over.
Right.
But people assume, hey, I'll have plenty of time, but especially if there's somebody who doesn't like to give up control, you just kind of sit there with a ticking time bomb and decision making gets slower, not faster
It does.
as you
Yeah.
age.
Yeah. And, as, my uncle, when I took over his affairs, he was starting to experience significant cognitive decline, right? And we had to leave it up to the attorney to make that call
Mm.
of did he still have that cognitive ability to now make me the executor, make me the financial power of attorney, right? So that's up to them. But if you're experiencing that, you are in that the clock is ticking, and you don't want to be forced to make those decisions out of panic,
Right.
right? Um,
Yeah, and you can always go and amend. It's not as costly as starting over from
right,
scratch. So you can always go and make adjustments because I think this is certainly an area where it's like progress over perfection because there's never a perfect guardian for your minor children.
no,
There's always a reason that no, maybe not that person. Or
no,
there's never, a perfect asset division when you're not sure if a family member is going to be responsible with money. But
right.
something is better than nothing. And in so many cases, that imperfect game plan stops the ball rolling even when there's intent.
Absolutely. And I even say that there are things, if you're part of that brigade of like estate planning is too expensive,
Yeah.
or I'm not going to do this, I'm going to be dead, who cares, right? But there are things that you can do that are free and
Hmm.
that are easy, that will help leave a little bit more of a breadcrumb trail for your family. Create a list of your assets and your debts, of your current assets and debts, right? What are your open accounts? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have a car loan, right? Update your beneficiaries, right? Um,
Almost every account can have a beneficiary designation. So you get asked when you open your retirement plan, you get asked for an IRA or Roth, but you can also give a beneficiary designation on your bank account. You can
yes,
um, leave a deed over to your trust or family
yep,
member for your property.
right,
Almost any brokerage account also can have what's called a
yes.
transfer on death or
Yes, a
payable on death.
TOD or a POD, right,
Right.
exactly. So those are things that you can do if you're part of the I don't care, I'll be dead anyway brigade, right?
Now, a
So,
big X, I think this is one of the flaming dumpster fires. If you have multiple kids and you're like, well, the responsible one or the one that lives close is so and so, we'll let them dole it out. I'm just going to put them as a joint owner on accounts and then also, just one beneficiary designation.
yeah,
I mean, that's just saying that you're leaving everybody else out. And even if you had a
Absolutely.
will, if the beneficiary designation is this, and I speak from recent experience
Yeah.
based on somebody that we've talked to, that is not
No, it
that is not
isn't.
going to work.
Yeah, because it's that account is then legally becoming theirs
Yes.
after you're gone. And yes, you are trusting that they're going to do the right thing, right? But things
It's not
happen
putting them in
amongst.
good stead, and it's certainly
No,
not
it's
coming from a
not.
place of trust when everybody
Absolutely.
else finds that out.
Absolutely. So,
Whew,
have
yes.
a family conversation. That's free, right? Sit down and have a family meeting to talk about your goals, your wishes, um,
Where things are
where
located.
things are located. Hey, I've got a will, and it's in the safe deposit box, which I'm not a big fan of, but and I've named X, Y, and Z as an authorized user, right? So, or has authorized access to the safe deposit box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having those conversations, I think, are key to sort of say, these are our goals, these are our wishes, here's what we're doing, and here's how we want you to be a part of this.
I love that. I also, let's talk about a potentially controversial topic. Um, so nowadays, I always encourage people to go to an attorney, pay the costs that are in the likely in the thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
to have a professional understand your circumstances
Yes.
and draft legal documents. But
Yes.
here's what I know. There are some people that I meet with every single year as a financial planner, and that remains on the to-do list, and it just may never happen.
Yeah.
I know some of my attorney friends who will cringe when I say this, but I think it's okay if you're saying, you know what, I'm okay with nothing if you're going to make me go and pay the cost for an attorney who has personalized service and will really anticipate many landmines
Right.
to use a digital document drafting, acknowledging that there are risks and you are not an attorney, but something like trust and will, or some financial planners use something like vanilla or
Yeah.
wealth.com.
Yeah.
This to me, if there was going to be nothing otherwise, is better than nothing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the fence about that, to be quite honest.
I get it with a hedge.
Yeah,
Like, I'm not saying,
I mean, but in full disclosure, like, I love the attention and it's being paid to this issue, right?
mm-hmm,
I applaud these companies for saying, you know what, Houston, we've got a problem. We want to offer an affordable solution, right, to people. So,
yeah,
yes, I cringe when I hear that as well, because I think that this is advice and guidance and infrastructure that is well worth paying and investing in.
absolutely. I 100%
Um,
agree. I would always
you
start
know,
with, like, here's 3 attorneys' names. Please give them a
absolutely
call.
right. But yeah, is it better than nothing? Probably.
And depending on the document, like, if you're sending your kid to college and you need a medical power of attorney,
Right. Yeah, or a
yeah,
financial power of attorney.
yeah,
Like, there are online, to go to Compassion and Choices, go to AARP. There are free, healthcare directives that you can download, right, and
mhm.
get witnessed. Um, you're right. Like, those might be great platforms for you to get that financial power of attorney for your 18-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
So I love the attention that's being paid to it. Was me investing in an experienced, knowledgeable, trusted estate attorney well worth the money?
That's always
One
what I'm gonna do.
100%.
Yes.
And I preach that in my book, right?
Yes.
And when I'm working with clients and they're like, I need an attorney, I also take that into consideration. What is your budget? Who's the type of person you want to work with? There are different,
How
types of
complex is
attorneys.
this?
Right.
Because if you're
Exactly.
dealing with a $10 million complicated situation
Yes.
with some
That's
family member that can't do their own
right.
thing,
Yeah.
that's different than if you have basic nuts and bolts with a very straightforward kind of,
100%.
yeah,
100%.
outcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number one recommendation, as people are intrigued by this conversation and thinking, gosh, this is compelling me to act as well as have conversations with family, is going to be to buy your book. But then
Yes.
after you've read the book, what are some practical steps, not only on that legal sphere, but also the rest of everything
Right.
else that you would suggest
Right.
that people
Yeah.
do?
I touched on a couple of them. It's creating that boring but oh so good inventory of your assets and debts, what you own and what you owe. That's also going to help you to get organized now. It could also help you identify maybe some subscriptions that are out there that you no longer need as you're going through
Totally.
and looking through everything, right? That knowledge and that organization is power. Um,
And
having
I will say as a financial planner too, just having that list once a year can help you to see without getting obsessed with the day-to-day fluctuations in the markets, kind of your
100%.
bottom line anyway. So
Yeah.
it's a great activity that kind of kills two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
How am
Yeah.
I doing financially? Am I improving over time? Or maybe markets are down like they have been parts of this year. And it's like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was. But also, what do I have? If there's a random account you forgot about that you haven't logged into for 3 years, maybe it's time to make that
Yeah.
phone call, things like
Yes.
that. So I love that piece of
Yeah.
advice.
And there are so many assets that are lost or not known about when somebody dies. So you don't want to
Uh-huh.
leave money on the table. So doing that very simple exercise of creating an inventory of your assets and debts, that'll be great fodder for when you do go to meet with an attorney and they're looking at the landscape and the scaffolding of your estate and saying, how do we plan for this? Right.
Mhm.
So getting organized, how will you share that with the person who will be in charge? You know,
Right.
picking who's going to be in charge, whether they're executor, they're your financial power of attorney, the guardian for your kids, right?
And your
Picking those
healthcare
out.
power of attorney doesn't have
Right.
to be the same person who
They
handles your
don't.
bank
They don't.
accounts.
Yeah. I say in my book, don't make it co. I am not a big fan of doing co-executors, co-trustees, co financial power of attorney. It's just a logistical hurdle
Mhm.
that makes it very
At least
hard.
if you do, hopefully they can each act independently. And then although don't, add too many people to the room, please have backups because
One, yes, yeah, yeah. I
you
mean,
may draft it when you're 50 and name peers, and they may have, like you may not talk to them when you're 80, and they may not be, reachable or able to handle their own affairs, much less
right.
yours.
And once you sort of picked your team, make sure that you communicate that with them and that they're up
Yes.
for the job.
Yes.
Speaking of a flaming dumpster fire, I had a client whose ex-husband named her the executor of his estate and they hadn't spoken in 50 years.
Oh my gosh. And that's another, I mean, look at those beneficiary designations. I had one time we pulled up an old 401k account for a client. Beautiful. It had grown so much as he left it alone for like 30 years, but also his deceased mother was the only beneficiary on the account, which was
Yeah.
news to his very happily married wife.
Oh, yes,
Fortunately, we
yes,
found it
yes.
while living, right?
Yes, but naming your beneficiaries is free. You can go do that right now.
And look
Thinking
at
through
every single account because, like, you may have 5 accounts at Fidelity. One may be right, but you probably have to do the update 4 more times to
bingo
get
through
everybody.
each and every one of them, going through
Mhm.
each of those with a fine tooth comb. Don't overlook your digital assets.
Oh,
That
amen.
is a huge
Yes.
aspect that is coming into play with estate administration, right?
So what's a digital asset?
So that is, there's not a universal term or definition for it, but I sort of think of everything that touches a keyboard,
Yeah.
right? And there could be different types. So your online accounts, your social media, your healthcare records that are online, the manuscript
Crypto
of your book,
accounts for
your
those
crypto, right? Your
guys listening, I should say.
yes, on if you have a business, your URLs, your
Mhm.
business assets, right? All of those can be considered digital assets. So inventorying your digital assets as well. How many email addresses you have and which ones you use for which, right? But then
Because your
also
estate planning documents can include instructions that
they
allow
can.
someone else
Yeah,
you
so
could
you want to
present
make
them
sure
to the
that you're
company.
right. You want to make sure that your documents include give access and authority over digital assets as well as tangible, right? So you want to make sure of that, but you want to leave those instructions like what do you want to have happen to your Facebook account,
Mhm.
right? How will they get access to digital photos? Um, are there anything with exchange values and, airline points, shopping points? Do you have an
Mhm.
Etsy account where selling things? You have PayPal, right? So detailing all of that and including those in that inventory we talked about is huge. And because people may be locked out of your life and they may not be able to get access.
And that's a reminder for passwords as well.
Yes, yes. And I go through all of that, in my book and talking about that. I'm not a huge fan of people just sharing passwords.
Agreed.
They're out of date as soon as you share them, and it may be against the terms of service. And also, many companies are going towards passwordless logins.
Yes.
So, but all that to say, just including those assets in that inventory will help you be light years ahead in terms of, somebody settling your estate. You can name that legacy contact on your Apple account or your Gmail or your Facebook. And then, like I said,
same goes for Social Security, which is very old school, but you can also name somebody that can act on your behalf that's separate from a power of attorney that can go and get information. So
100%.
There's just so many little details.
Yeah. And that's why you need like a personal trainer or organization. Like I say, we are like personal traders for legacy organization. Then bringing in once they go through that, meet with an attorney, have a consult, meet with at least 3 to sort of see you would click with, and then work with somebody, and then have that family meeting and revisit this every year, every couple of years to make sure it still reflects your wishes and goals.
Well, I consider myself motivated after this conversation. For those that are listening and feeling like maybe subject is a little less yucky and a little more, a reward for your future self, and feels motivated to do the work, where we'll make sure to have links, but tell us where we can find you, Rachel.
Yeah, so you can go to my website, which is myafterlight.com. You can find me, Rachel Donnelly, on LinkedIn, My Afterlight on Instagram. My book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. I have Kindle versions, hardback and paperback, and then coming soon will be the audiobook version.
Can't wait.
But I've added just some fun and some humor and irreverence to this book to make it a little entertaining with a subject that is very dark and can be very depressing to think about.
Well, Rachel, congratulations on your book. I love this conversation, and we just really appreciate your insight and experience on a subject that most of us only have to deal with a few times.
Yeah.
So thanks for doing the great work.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to pearlplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned.